Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining the space today. My name is Aoife Burke, and I'll be your host. Before we kick things off, I just want to say that the content that will be discussed on this space is intended for information and educational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. Okay, so in light of International Women's Day, I'm joined by a very special guest, Julia Lee. For those that you don't know who Julia is an ETF equities investment strategist at State Street Global Advisors. She has over 20 years' experience in the financial markets and has worked in various roles, including CIO for Australia Equities Fund and equity strategist at Bell Direct for 11 years. Julia is also on the board of directors for the Australian Stockbrokers Foundation and has her Masters of Business in Finance. Julia, thanks so much for joining me today. We are delighted to have you here.
Such a pleasure. Looking forward to it.
What amazing career that you've had over the last 20 years. It's quite impressive. But maybe it's best that you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. I think you can do a better job than I can.
Sure. So I've been in finance now for over 20 years. I am a bit of a nerd. I think in my earlier years, I was definitely an introvert, but I would have to say I'm very much an extrovert now. But I'm also quite independent as well. I am quite strong-willed, which makes it a little bit difficult for hubby sometimes. But I do love the markets and I do love learning as well. So I'm a bit of a reader. I like numbers, and I guess I'm a bit of a late bloomer as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And to the point that you mentioned that you're an introvert, um, how
I think I was an
you,
introvert. I
of
wouldn't
course,
say I'm an introvert
yeah,
anymore.
of course, you're now an extrovert. But how did you transition between that? You're constantly out there, putting yourself out there. How did you transition between that?
Sure. I think one of the things that people ask me or gets commented on quite a bit is that I seem to be a natural speaker, that I'm quite good at public speaking. But that definitely was not always the case, and it was a learnt skill for me. So whether it was the getting over the nerves part or the part around body language or even the confident walk, I think all of those were sort of taught skills. So it definitely wasn't something that came naturally to me. And I worked very hard, I guess, to acquire that skill of being able to speak. And I think one thing that made a very big impression on me for someone who was a late bloomer, an introvert, and relatively shy in my younger years was that everybody has the right to speak. So to be able to express yourself in a way that people understand, I think was quite important to me. And I guess that's why I worked at the skill, and hopefully I am much better at it now than I was when I started off.
I would definitely say so. And how did you? Can you tell us a little bit about how you started in finance? Like, why did you choose a career in finance, and what was the first point of contact in the financial world? Was there a parental influence, or was this something that you were just always interested in?
I would love to say that, I always knew what I was going to do, and that was finance, but that was not the case at all. I think back when I started working, it wasn't unusual just to fall into your line of work. For me, I actually wanted to be a lawyer from the time I was about 7 years old. But at the time that
Oh,
I went to uni, there were so many lawyers that the unemployment rate with law was so high that you had to do a double degree. So that was sort of 5 years of a double degree plus an extra year of law school and then 3 years practicing as a solicitor. And I thought, oh, that sort of sounds like an extra 10 years. So I actually went and ended up studying business at UTS, so similar to a commerce degree. But throughout uni, I worked at an Italian restaurant. And then
wow.
I tried to open an Italian restaurant. And to do that, I had to take out a loan with a NAB. And really, I needed to pay back that loan when it didn't work out. So I saw an ad in the paper and it said, "Do you want to be a stockbroker?" And I thought, oh, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
We'll give it a go. We'll give it a go.
And I was lucky in that sense because I do love the work. I love being able to understand businesses and to work in a market where you're constantly being able to keep up to date with what's happening in the world, what's happening in terms of advancements in technology or biotechnology, and science, I think is an amazing thing. So I love to read, and I never have a shortage of stories to read when it comes to the markets.
Yeah, great. And between transitioning from, oh, I might want to be a stockbroker, how did you become, say, an equities investment strategist? How did that happen? Did you work your way up to a certain position, or did you just apply and then start from there? Like, how did that happen?
Sure. So, I guess when it comes to the finance world, you sort of everybody starts at a base level, and then you move into the area that you're interested in. My area of interest is always markets. And I took
Mm,
the view that, when I started, I didn't want to just sort of, I guess, sell something that I wasn't actually involved in. So I made a huge effort to walk the walk and talk the talk. And that means anything that I was talking about, I made the effort to actually trade myself or invest in myself as well. And I started in finance with the view that, in any occupation or in any profession, it usually takes you about 2 or 3 years of learning to understand the lessons involved and what was happening in that type of world. So I started an investment diary with the view that I wanted to learn as much about investing as possible in a sort of 2 to 3 year time frame. So in that time frame, I sort of gave myself or I allowed myself the opportunity to lose money. I thought to myself for the 2 to 3 years that the goal wasn't to make as much money as possible, but the goal was to learn the skill of being able to make money so that I can apply it for the rest of my life. So that was a great period for me, and I learned a lot of lessons. I delved into fundamental analysis, technical analysis, understanding businesses, looking at industry analysis. I also looked at things like options trading, which is a lot more risky. But that was a great period where I sort of laid the foundation of going into equity strategy, which I really do enjoy. And the reason I enjoy being an equity strategist is I love understanding cycles and how that impacts on different businesses and the different business environment as well. So, yeah, it's been a long journey, but one I've certainly enjoyed. So I've gone from presenting things like fundamental analysis, technical analysis, tax effective investing options to heading up a fundamental analysis unit where I got to travel a lot to the US. And then I moved to Bell Direct, where I was an equity strategist there for 11 years, and then moved to do my own funds management business, Berman Invests, which I sold in June. And now here I am at State Street Global Advisors as an equities strategist for the ETF area.
wow, amazing. And during that period, when you mentioned the 2 to 3 years of learning, how did you find that your confidence was initially versus after the 3 years? And how did you find the resources to educate yourself? Like nowadays, we have podcasts. I'm sure not like before then, we didn't have too many resources available as we do now. Was it through books or uni, or how did you teach yourself?
I think university is a great framework for the theoretical part, but it doesn't really teach you how to invest yourself
Yeah.
or make money. So the practical experience I think was invaluable, as was reading books. So learning about things from people who started much before. So I guess the foundations were people like Benjamin Graham, Warren Buffett, learning about securities analysis and understanding companies, and then moving on to people who traded, I guess, more on a shorter time frame. So looking at hedge fund managers and their type of experiences as well. So I do have a love of reading. Unfortunately, while I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to watch much TV. So my source of entertainment was books. So I was lucky in that I did enjoy reading because, as you mentioned, there wasn't a lot of resources to learn about trading and investing. But I learned some pretty big lessons, and I lost quite a lot of money as a young person as well during those lessons. But luckily, over that time frame, I did also end up making quite a bit of money. So that's how I bought my first property as well.
Yeah, amazing. I'm sure you need to fail in order to succeed, isn't that what they say? So, that was your learning curve, I suppose. But when it comes to investing, you mentioned that you, of course, lost some money, but I'm sure you've also made money. But what is your investment philosophy, and what criteria do you like to use when considering an investment opportunity?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that I've learned in investing is that investing is about the future. And in many ways, living is about the future as well. So when it comes to looking at potential investments, I started off my journey looking at quality companies that you could own for the long term. But what I found with some of the quality companies is that they wouldn't go up a lot in share price. And in many instances, they would just move sideways for many many years. So that wasn't hugely exciting for me, but I would always try and find out what is it that moves the share price. And really, share prices are about understanding a business and valuing a business, but it's also about the future of that business. I like to liken it to buying your local corner shop, and your local corner shop's been growing at 5% per annum every single year for the last 10 years, and it's likely to grow at 5% per annum. And you pay about $2 million for this corner shop. 3 months later, you decide, I really don't like working behind the counter or running this corner shop, so I'm going to sell it. How much would you be likely to sell it for? And the answer is probably the same price, around about $2 million. Nothing's changed, everything's remained pretty much the same. So, really, the value of that business, is a reflection of the value of a share price, because a
Yeah.
share price is a reflection of a business as well. But let's say with that corner shop, an apartment block's going up next door. It's going to have 1,000 residents in it, and they're going to put it up in record time. So in 3 months, the build's going to happen and people are going to move in. Well, then, would you be able to sell your corner store for more money? And the answer is probably yes, because demand is likely to go up for that corner store. So I guess just understanding that sort of concept is super exciting for me. And we've just come through earnings season here in Australia, and you may have noticed a few companies that have come out with a record profit, and yet the share price falls. And I guess the question is, why does that happen?
Yeah.
And to someone who hasn't had a huge amount of experience in the market, that's sort of confusing. But if you understand that, the market's already priced in something, and it's all about the new information that moves share prices, I think it can be quite exciting when looking at the markets.
Yeah, amazing. That's a really interesting point. And in terms of looking at investment opportunities, is there particular ways that you gather your information? You mentioned at the start that you like to stay up to date on, like, there's things happening in the world constantly changing. So how do you, like, stay on top of that to ensure that you're making the right investment decisions?
I think each investor is different, but when it comes to me, I like to look at it through three different lenses. So the first lens is the macro environment, and the macro environment to me is just about understanding the business environment. Is it an environment that's easy for companies to increase profitability, or an environment that's harder for companies to increase profitability? So the first lens is that macro environment, which to me talks about the business environment. How hard or easy is it to make money? The second lens I like to look through is through the micro lens, and that's through looking at the company and understanding the underlying business and the drivers. Is this company likely to grow into the future? How much is it likely to grow and for how long? Where is it in terms of its business journey? Is it immature or is it highly mature with lower growth rates? So that's the micro lens. And then I also like to look at sort of the supply demand dynamics of investors. So this is a technical analysis component of it, where I like to look at how much demand there is for a stock and how much interest there is in a stock. So I guess they're the sort of three lenses I like to look through: the macro, the micro, as well as the technical lens. And in many ways, all three sort of are looking at the same thing. But to me, I feel as though it gives me a much more complete picture of investing than just looking at one lens.
Yeah, great. That's very insightful, especially for anyone who is listening and is wanting to start to get into investing, and maybe there's different strategies that they can have a look at that you've mentioned there. But as you know, it is International Women's Day, and this year's theme is Embrace Equity. If you didn't know, so I would like to know, maybe, what does this statement mean to you as a female in a financial industry?
Well, I hope it means that it's become easier for women to have balance and choice. Certainly, as I was growing up and going into finance, it wasn't always the easiest journey. In many ways, I guess I got questioned even from my parents at times on sort of pursuing this path, but also in little areas as well. Oh, well, little or big. It was a big area for me. When when I've got two beautiful girls, they're 5 and 8, but when I had those kids, I didn't have any paid maternity leave for either
Mm,
of those kids. So,
mm.
with Senna, the second one, I do enjoy working. I was sort of back at work part time, sort of 2 weeks after she was born. So, hopefully, the journey has gotten a lot easier for women, and they have the choice to have the balance as well as the career that they would like to have as well.
Yeah, 100%. And do you think that women have a choice in terms of the financial industry, or maybe are we making steps to make things change in that regard? Or what are some of the challenges that you've seen yourself personally and within the industry for women?
Oh my goodness, there's been so much change within the industry. I actually work in a team now where there's more women than men.
Oh,
Back
great.
when I started 20 years ago, that would have been unheard of. I mean, when I started on the trading floor back in 2000, I sort of looked around the floor and there was about 200 people on the floor. And I thought I would walk around one day and just count the number of women on the floor. And I think I counted about 8. Now, some of them might have been at lunch or in the toilet or something, but that gives you an idea of how different things were a couple of decades ago compared to now. So I definitely think that things have changed for the better, and it's definitely a different dynamic working in finance than it was a couple of decades ago. So for any women listening in that want to go into finance, it's a great industry to be in. Some fantastic people as well. And I think, in terms of an industry, like many industries, it's really changed a lot over the decades.
Yeah. And what do you think that change was from? Do you think maybe days like International Women's Day and maybe more women just realizing, oh, I can do this too? What do you think that reason was for that change?
I think there's a lot more women participating in the workplace, so that
Yeah.
obviously enables change. But also, the realization that there has been a gap, whether it's in terms of pay or whether it's in terms of executive positions or women on boards. And just being able to track that data and that visibility, I think, has made a big difference to the industry. And of
Yeah.
course, a lot of global companies are setting targets as well. And I think that's just simply accelerated the change
Yes,
that has
definitely.
occurred.
Like here at eToro, we have 50% male, 50% female, and then 50% of our female leaders are in leadership position, and that's a conscious effort. We want to have diversity here in the office. We also want, like, being in, like, at eToro, a financial broker, we want to have more women in leadership positions and more women involved in the industry. So I think even employers' responsibilities of making a conscious effort to have a balance is also a good positive change that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be lovely not to think about targets or
Yes.
how many women or how many men are thinking about that. And I think we're getting to that stage, but certainly those targets have helped accelerate, I think, equality in the finance space.
Yes, 100%. Being Australia's most popular financial commentator, what do you think this, or what impact do you think this might have on the industry, or for women that are maybe watching you every day?
You're too kind. I certainly didn't think that I would be where I am today when I was starting out. And I guess I was sort of taught that, it's very difficult to become someone that you can't see. And I think because of that, I have tried to be quite visible. Sometimes even when didn't necessarily want to be. But I think it is important for the next generation that they can see different types of people in finance, whether it's in terms of diversity, in terms of gender, or in terms of race. I think it's really nice for younger kids to be able to see that there is a mix in there, and they can strive to be whoever they want to be as long as they put in the work as well.
Yeah. And do you think that maybe, like, how can we encourage more women to explore this area? What can be done to help women feel like they can be part of the conversation, join in the conversation, and have the confidence to do so?
In my experience, there's a real difference in the way women and men sometimes view potential positions and moving into leadership positions. Um, and this is my experience, so it might be different person to person, but men tend to be a bit more confident when applying for the jobs, whereas
Mm.
women tend to question themselves going into jobs. And I would say, apply for jobs, not that you are suited to now, but the next job you want in the future, because I think a career is about stretching yourself and it is a learning journey. And this is something I learned from Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors in the world, where he would have a team around him that would go and look at a company, potentially take over or buy a large stake in the business. But then he would send those people to go in and operate the business as well. And he would send those people in to operate those businesses, not because they were experts in that business, but because he backed their ability to go and figure it out. And I think sometimes when you step up to a new position, it's not necessarily about having the skills to be able to fulfill that position, but it's about backing your ability to be able to figure it out. And I think that's an important key when it does come to looking at your next position and your career path, that you don't want to be constantly applying for the job that you're suited to today because there's no movement over time, but really you want to be applying for the job that you want to go into next, and then backing yourself that you'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, that's really good advice, especially to anyone who's listening. Of course, backing yourself gives you the confidence to be able to progress and move forward and maybe go for roles that necessarily are out of your comfort zone. But as they say, like, being out of your comfort zone can make you move to bigger and better things. So having that confidence is definitely key. Julia, so clearly you've had an impressive career, having just chatted to you over the last 20 minutes. However, you've achieved so many amazing things. Who have you looked to that has inspired your career? Would it be your parents? Would it be like Warren Buffett, like you've mentioned? Or is there someone that you look to on the news? Like, who's your role model?
I get a lot of inspiration from people around me. Certainly in finance, there's a lot of people that have been in the industry for a long time. So one of the things I do treasure, whether it's in my personal relationships or when I'm looking for mentors, is longevity in terms of the industry. So
Mm.
I have lots of people surrounding me that have been in the industry a long time that I admire. But also, I really like working with young people as well. There's an energy that sort of comes to them, and sometimes that energy comes with older people as well, but definitely I'm inspired by people that have lots of energy and lots of passion. So I'm constantly finding those people around me, and it's really great to work with those people as well.
That's great. Overall, what tips would you give to women looking to start but maybe are not so sure on how to start or how they can progress or move forward? For example, if a woman is looking to get started and invested, have no idea where to start, doesn't believe in herself, doesn't think she has the confidence, oh, I can't do this, like changing the narrative in her head, what tips would you give to someone who's thinking that way?
Sure. I think whether it's a woman or a man, the same sort of thing applies, that sometimes it can be very difficult to change the narrative in your head.
Mm,
So when it comes to sort of getting to a roadblock like that, it's sometimes about tackling it differently. When it comes to money, often, if there are those roadblocks, it's just about trying to make it easier so you don't have to think about it. So often with successful investing over time, if you are facing those roadblocks, it could be about automation. So a chunk of your pay coming out every pay and just being automatically invested so you don't have to spend the emotional time and energy thinking about it. But I guess when it comes to career as well, sometimes it is about faking it until you make it.
yeah.
There's there's this really powerful study I read, and if you can't sort of change your internal message, sometimes it's about changing your physiology or the external. And I guess an example is someone that's very depressed. You can often see it because their shoulders are slumped, they're looking down, their tone is very low, they speak quite slowly, they're very low energy. And sometimes, if you can't change the internal messages, some of the things that are easier to do is just working on the external part of things. So, posture, looking up, trying to change sort of the pace. And I've sort of tried it when I couldn't sleep as well. Instead of trying to tell myself to go to sleep, I try and think about, what do you do physically as you go to sleep, and things like
Yeah.
controlling breathing, relaxing muscles. But there was this great study that was also done with two different groups. And in one group, they showed them a sad movie to provoke emotions of sadness. And the other group, they just got them to move their facial muscles to express the same sort of sadness. And amazingly, both groups reported feeling the same type of emotion. So I think that's quite amazing. It doesn't matter whether the message comes from inside out or outside in, both can be quite a powerful way to
Yeah.
change yourself. So if you're finding it hard in changing the internal message, I think maybe just focus on the external, which can sometimes be easier.
And I think maybe surrounding yourself or putting yourself in environments or around people that maybe have similar interests or have maybe a little bit more experience than you, and you want to learn from them. So putting yourself in the right environment also can help change the narrative, of, oh, I can't do this, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, don't know how to get in started investing, and that type of thing.
Absolutely. Finding a mentor can be fantastic as well, just to give you that extra step up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just to wrap things up, Julia, can you tell us one rule that you live by when it comes to investing? Any rule, anything that you live by, a daily mantra, or just one thing that you've done over the last 20 years that you stick by no matter what?
I think just keep investing. The beauty of investing for me is time, and the compounding effect gets much greater the longer you're invested in there. So for me, financial freedom is the freedom to have choice. It isn't everything in life, but it certainly makes things a lot easier. So I think investing is a fantastic tool, and the power of compounding is pretty amazing.
Yeah, amazing. That's great. Thanks so much, Julia, for joining our space today. It was great having you on, and getting a glimpse into the last 20 years of your career, and just a glimpse. But I hope that anyone that is listening to this, who may not have the confidence or may not understand or know how to enter the world of investing, can take inspiration or encouragement from Julia. So once again, Julia, thanks so much for your time and your friendly advice. And thank you to everyone who has listened today.
Thank you for tuning in. It's been great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Julia.